have an opportunity to meet coming through the door. My name is Nicole Peck, and I am with Relevance, and I am thrilled to welcome you to day 2 of the Anti-Summit, first do tank of the day. Welcome, thank you so much. I just want to remind everyone that we are encouraging everyone to be active participants. I know Jonathan's gonna ask everyone for opinions and to be part of the conversation. Please do. And we are also, we handed out, we're very low tech. We gave out some note cards, and just a reminder, sort of, as the session is taking place, if there are things that jump out, share them with us. Critiques, criticisms. We are in beta this year. We are looking for your feedback, actively soliciting it so that we can improve on this event and everything moving forward. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Jonathan Baskin. He is a contributor for Forbes, has authored 8 books, working on his 9th, he told me, and hoping to release it this year. So he's got a busy year ahead of him, I'm sure. And his amazing panel, and I'm sure this is going to be an awesome session. I'm so excited to be in the room.
And whoever tweets the most, I brought a book of his that he's going to sign, and they get to take it home.
Oh. Awesome. And we're going to be tweeting against hashtag Anti-Summit and...
So, just like say it right.
Disrupt social.
Disrupt social.
Disrupt social. Awesome.
It's better.
Cool, and this one works too. Cool, thank you, Nicole. Good morning, everybody.
Absolutely.
Good morning. So is 9 o'clock early? Yeah? Okay, sorry about that. So just a quick follow-up. So the way this is going to work this morning is that I'm going to do a quick spiel, a quick setup of sort of a thought experiment, and then I'm going to throw it to y'all as participants in this conversation, and that I have questions in case you don't, but I'd really like you to help drive the conversation. Our goal is to get out of here at 10 o'clock because we have to get over to the awards ceremony for the Tribeca Disruptor Innovation Awards. But to be able to come out of here, this is called a do tank, come out of here with a thing or 2 or 3 that we'd like to pursue collectively or individually after this event. I'm offering to be the point person for that. I didn't put my email up here, but I will. So if you walk out of here saying, interesting idea, I wonder how we'd explore that, I'm going to be putting together informal teams to do that over the next couple weeks. So if there's something that interests you after this, please reach out to me, and I will put you in touch with the team and promise to never spam you. Also, the speakers here are all really, and I'm going to introduce them in a second, they're here from really august, important places, and they're clearly experts in the field. They are here speaking for themselves today. They are not speaking on behalf of their institutions, which means, hopefully, they're going to say a bunch of really cool shit that they couldn't normally say if they were, doing the official mouthpiece. And I'm going to quickly tell you who they are, and then they're going to talk about themselves in a second. First, over here on my right is Donetta Campbell, who, by the way, curated this entire session. So a quick hand to Donetta. And she's a social disruptor and a Disruptor Foundation fellow amongst, you have like 500 other titles, correct?
As many as I can get.
Excellent. So, yeah, we'll be collecting titles for her later.
Yes.
Okay. Man. How did I screw this up?
For Leslie.
Yeah.
Did you lose Leslie?
I lost Leslie. Sorry, no, I'm sorry. I made my list before they sat down. Leslie Richin, which rhymes with kitchen, is a social media editor at Billboard. You've heard of that? Yeah. Yay! Come on! Let's wake up! Okay. Next. Josh Matches. Josh here is Director of Integrated Marketing at NASDAQ. To Josh's left is Kelly Courtney, who is Senior Director of Communications and Public Affairs for MIT Innovation Initiative. And finally, I just learned this morning, the man who's up to be the next Supreme Court nominee, Shri.
But explain.
Yes, sir. So I was asking Shri how to pronounce his name, and he said it's easy because somebody with the exact same name could be up to be the next Supreme Court nominee if Obama gets a chance to make the nomination. So you're not really going to... Well, who knows, though, right? In this day and age, you can be confused and you can get on a road and do cool things. So anyways, it's Shri Srinivasan. He is the Chief Digital Officer for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Yay. Okay. So we're going to talk in a minute. What I want to do is I want to set up kind of the think tank here. And at risk of being disruptive, I thought it would be really important if we could start a conversation about social media by imagining a world in which social media didn't exist. So for the next 45 minutes, we're going to assume that social media have not been invented. You are not tweeting right now? Well, no, you can. This is a thought experiment. But so use half of your brain to do the tweeting. But imagine you didn't yet. If that.
You mean the internet?
Oh, that thing. Yeah. So there's no internet. There's no social media technology. There's no Facebook. There's no YouTube. There's nothing happening via the internet. The thing doesn't exist yet. Okay, I know it's hard, and by the way, for those of us old enough, I can actually imagine those days, but let's assume it's right now.
There's still a post office, right?
There's still a post office, right? There's still record stores, but that's another story. So, but it's now. We're not nostalgia. Let's just assume it's right now. We don't have the internet. We don't have social media, okay? And let's assume that advertising still works. So let's assume that we're looking at ads and we believe them. We are happy, there's a tiger in our tank. We are loving McDonald's. All these messages actually resonate and we actually buy them, literally and figuratively, okay? So there is no problem in advertising or marketing to fix. Because that's actually how we experience social, that thing that doesn't exist right now. The way we experience social is it grew up, the technology and the utility, in a world in which advertising and marketing communications was going to crap. It grew up hand in hand with that function. That's why when we think about social, we think about marketing. But let's assume that advertising works. So we don't have to fix that problem. What's happening in our world?
Mad Men.
Mad Men. Are people less social? Well, of course not, right? People are as social now without that internet social thing as we've always been. We have different tools.
They're having martini lunches.
Yeah, thank you. But they're having martini lunches and they're having Tupperware parties. Right? These mechanisms are nothing new. People are very social. They just do it through different tools, different media. But they're just as social. We don't have this thing called the internet, but they're just as social. More importantly, they actually affect a lot of change. I mean, the whole mechanism of social experience is to change stuff, to change our world, change our lives, change the businesses with which we interact, change the governments that help us run our lives. All these activities, and I won't read, I apologize for the text there, but these things all occur. This is what people do. This is what people do when they get together. Sure, they talk about fun stuff. They talk about, I like your tie, or I think your suit's stupid, or whatever, but generally, what people really do socially is they affect change. So this is happening right now, even though we don't have social media, right? Because advertising's fine, it's fixed. And nobody's waking up in the morning wanting to have an intimate relationship with their toothpaste. It just doesn't happen. Because remember, marketers aren't using social, because social don't exist. Social media don't exist. So my question for the panel and for you this morning is, okay, now if we actually could flip that switch and actually have all of the internet and the social technology that we've grown up with, if we could have it now at the flip of a button, it is now on, it now exists, and it wasn't a replacement for advertising, how would we use it? How would brands use it? How would institutions use it? Thinking less as marketers and more to the basic social mechanisms of what's happening. And I posit to you that it would be for activism. Because that's kind of what it's been for all along. Why we have, by the way, so now social's turned back on, so it exists again. It's kind of what's been going on underneath the marketing anyway. The real mechanism of peer-to-peer interaction is social activism. Not just against causes like a better planet or gender equality or any of these big ticket items, but also local activism. It's how people collect to do everything from go get their kids to the same soccer field to deciding what time the garbage should be picked up. Its mechanisms are different now that we have social, in a world that we're not trying to replace advertising. It does things differently. In activism, there are no consumers, there are just collaborators. There's no audience in activism, there are just participants. Marketers talk about content and getting people to interact with content. But activists are engaged in context. We're not pushing content to activists. Activists are engaging with the context of their lives or their communities. Same thing, entertainment. activists enjoy entertainment, but the mechanisms of activism aren't entertaining. It's relevance, it's meaning, it's importance, it matters. We do things as activists because they matter to us, not just because they're entertaining. And finally, it's not want, it's need, and it's not about status quo. There's no active group in the history of the planet that necessarily wants to do nothing but perpetuate the status quo. Usually we call them totalitarian dictatorships. Every other activist organization exists to change stuff. So what if our new media use and our brands and our institutions use that idea and incorporated that idea? Well, how would we be content advocates? How could we make people actually care about the content and use it and apply it? Could we see products as crusades? What would that mean? True co-creation. Anybody recognize that car? By the way, that's the Edsel. So that's a wonderful example of the failures of crowdsourced design. But anyway, imagine true co-creation that actually worked. Transparent corporate governance. How about issues that are relevant to context and changes that are both community-based and that change lives? Again, right now we have probably a half an hour to think about how brands and institutions could use social media to become actively involved in people's lives and in their communities. Not just use social media to engage with them, but engage in meaningful things, whether that is a big issue or it is simply something that matters right here, right now to those of us in the room. So what would that look like? So that's what I wanted us to talk about today. How would we change it? What would we do differently? What would we do the same and just do more of? How could social media be different when we walk out of the room right now than it was when we walked in? And can it? I think it can. So what would it look like? So what I want to do, because again, by the way, Donetta said that somebody who tweets the most gets this. I will also offer a book to the first person who asks a question. So keep that in mind, because what I'm going to do now is very briefly go to the panel, let them just tell you who they are really, and give a top-line thought about this issue or this idea, maybe a thought starter for you. And then once they're done, whoever asks the first question of what would that be or how would we apply it, I will give you not only this book, but you can pick it from my entire list and pick the one you want. God help you. So, with that, Donetta, do you just want to say again hi and who you are? And
Sure. So my name's Donetta Campbell. I come out of almost 25 years of public relations. And in the shift into digital and social media and the panic of that and watching everybody freeze in their tracks, I decided to learn how to do social media and found out that I was very much in love with it, much more than public relations. It's much more fun, and I can do PR through social. And it's been a long journey. I've always tried to connect causes to corporate because I had great mentors starting out in my early days at, the big agencies that I worked with, and so I always tried to make it meaningful. And I think that's come back to be a huge benefit for the way that I've been building my models and ecosystems and trying to raise the bar in social engagement and engage with big thinkers, people who aren't quite comfortable with social, academics, people who change the world. A lot of them are in this audience that have taken a leap of faith with me to get their voices beyond this room, because I watch them go and speak and say these wonderful things to change the world, and I think, why is it just in here? And I talk them into doing Twitter at first, and it's kind of the gateway drug to social for somebody who's a little nervous with their brand. I try to take really good care of them. We have an ecosystem of about 70 big thinkers now, from academics tied to the UN to corporate. And in my mind, it comes to brands in the sense of, I still work with Weber Shandwick, working on the corporate thought leadership track in the healthcare side. It comes to brands where brand leaders that need to now have a social voice and they need to be thought leaders. In the old days in PR, you could almost kind of buy that. In the new activism, and if you don't have that kind of traction on social, you can't go out with a Harvard degree as an economist and become an economist guru. But in the ecosystem I've built, I can hook them onto the coattails like a lazy river at those hotels and bump them through with other big thinkers that give them more credibility, more places to speak, more things to think about, and a group of peers that it's almost like a super freeway of big thinkers moving through it, and the on-ramps are the ones that are coming in through the brand side, where you're touching on the big brands and advertising.
So two big ideas, the lazy river of social media and Twitter as a, what is it, a starter drug?
A gateway
drug. I love that. Those are so tweetable. Oh, yes.
I would love to know now. I've gotten into Twitter relatively recently, and it is so fascinating how you have to like squish everything down. Now, what I don't quite understand is the hashtag versus the at. So, what is the value in pushing a product, et cetera, through hashtag and through at? Should you use both? Should you use one or the other, and in what circumstance?
I'm Leslie, I work at Billboard, I do social media. I love that question because I actually ask myself that all the time. I use both just because I think that sometimes you want to use the at mention because you're trying to get them to see the tweet and to retweet it and to engage with it in some way. But sometimes I just use the hashtag because I just want to be part of the conversation.
So,
And not, depends also how many times you're tweeting about the topic.
what does the hashtag actually do?
Well, it just allows you to join a conversation for social good in some way.
Well, it's a
Okay.
marker of this event. So for this event, we have a hashtag. If you tweet with that hashtag, you can go and search that hashtag and follow down and literally come out with all the comments that made any sense to anybody. So if you're a big thinker, you want them to put their Twitter out there and a hashtag, you'll notice more and more events having them, because it literally will catalog what happened in the room. So it's really exciting because you can look at that hashtag and see who was there and follow them, and there you have a community. Everybody here walks out and you all know each other, even though you maybe didn't speak to each other. If you're tweeting, I go follow you, I follow the hashtag, and you start to engage that way.
Love it. Thank
Josh?
you.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm Director of Integrated Marketing at NASDAQ. And I love this topic because I think there's a lot of articles out there kind of about how brands shouldn't be people and how like they shouldn't have personality and all this stuff. But I think that if you think about what a brand is, you like behind that brand are real people. Behind that Twitter handle are real people that have like points of view and emotional touch points that they care about. So I think whenever brands are engaging in social media, activism and social good should be a really big part of your strategy, because you know Google's culture is totally different than Williams-Sonoma's culture. Like they have different agendas. The people that work there have different mindsets. Like anybody that works at one of those companies, they kind of have sort of a like-mindedness, even just through corporate culture. And pushing that out, and not only pushing your message, but like kind of showing that there are human beings behind a corporation is, I think, the most important part of social media.
Well, can I ask you a quick question? And this is what we had a chance to chat before the session of the Charlie Hebdo experience.
Yes.
In terms of that idea of the activism of people behind the scenes at NASDAQ, I mean, you're active in your community, in your world, and you see the things happening outside the world. Tell everybody what you did. It was not standard marketing, it wasn't advertising, and it raised a bunch of questions, right?
Absolutely. So during the Charlie Hebdo massacre, we have French reporters that report from NASDAQ every day. And the first thing she goes to me and she says, when are you going to tweet about this? And I went through all the rungs and finally decided that, you know, we had our designer create a Je suis Charlie graphic, and we put it on the tower and we took a photo. It was retweeted like 3,000 times within a minute. And people were sending thank yous from France, and people were, you know, I did get some comments like, you know, what business do you have? And I'm like, well, we're home for journalists. This is a journalist, this is a personal attack. This is, you know, something where our community was affected, and we're responding on behalf of our community. This is not, you know, a shameless ploy for attention. And I got some backlash internally because, you know, we have employees in the Middle East, because we have, you know, while NASDAQ is a stock exchange and our headquarters downtown and are, of course, in Times Square, but we run exchanges all around the world, and there are people in the Middle East who potentially could be in danger because we came out in support against terrorism. But I think it's things like terrorism that you, as a brand, if behind you are human beings, and human beings that are in your building are affected by something horrible, you need to stand up for them. So I think it's the job of social media.
Cool, thank you. Kelly, do you want to just give everybody again who you are and
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kelly Courtney. I am the Senior Director at MIT for the new Innovation Initiative. We just launched this recently, a couple months ago, and my background is actually launching new initiatives, and about 20 years worth of helping to launch initiatives that gather people from around the world. It includes human rights work, also women in venture capital, bringing different communities together. So really what drives me is the ability to bring people together and create community and engage stakeholders. I'm rather new to the social media world, to be honest. I'm sitting up here without a pen in my hand, but I felt like that would just not be cool sitting next to these guys with the old-fashioned pen and paper. But who here remembers Rolodexes, right? Did any of you have a traveling bag for your Rolodexes when you were going on a business trip? I mean, I did. I had 4 Rolodexes, and I'd roll that thing. And that was more important than my wardrobe when I was traveling. But so anyway, so I'm rather new to social media, but what I love about it is giving a voice to the voiceless. And people are engaged, and when you talk about brands are now seeking the opinions of their customers in ways that really didn't happen before. So it's a pleasure to be here with you and enjoying the conversation.
Cool, thank you, Kelly. And Sri, introduce yourself, but also let me throw a question at you about this challenge that I think Josh pointed out, which is it reason? God, I love this.
He has 2 phones. He's periscoping and tweeting at the same time. What are the rest of you doing? You're just listening and paying attention. Come on, guys.
Actually, the social media's perpetual motion machine is in the next room. Sri, so about this issue of, and I get Kelly's point about we all want social to let us be heard and be engaged, but this idea of, is it reasonable for brands to operate like public institutions? You have a very different mandate at the Met in terms of what you define as engagement. I think there's a lot more about context and about experience that you're allowed to do because of the nature of your business, as it were.
Sure.
Just talk about that inherent, not conflict, but the differences maybe and the similarities between the two.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me, and I'm delighted to be here with all of you. At the Met, we certainly think a lot about this issue of connecting brands. And so my title is Chief Digital Officer. I tell people I run a 70-person startup inside a 145-year-old company. So the Met has 70 people doing digital and another 70 people doing technology. And the difference is we do all the stuff that's public facing, and the CTO and his team do a wonderful job with the infrastructure and our ability to do everything. So the wireless, the Wi-Fi, the wires, the devices, all of that stuff. I wanted to mention your great thought experiment about not being on the internet or not having the internet. First of all, we'd all be better read, we'd all have more time for our families, it'll be a better place. But yesterday, before this session, Kelly LeBrock, some of you remember her, retweeted something in which I was mentioned. And so I tweeted, 14-year-old me would have died if Kelly LeBrock had RT'd me, but 14-year-old me never heard of the internet or other weird science. So that was
clever.
Thank you. One person got it. Thank you.
The movie.
Yeah.
She was the.
Yeah,
She was the.
She was the lady in red, woman in red, also. So the way that we think about it at the Met, I'm going to give you just one specific example. We have a lot of ways we're doing social, and we're very active. In fact, we doubled our social media team to 2 people. And if any of you know someone, we have a job listing for a second person doing social at the Met, and you can find all our listings on LinkedIn. At any point, we have about 75 to 100 job openings at the Met. Only about 25, 30 are listed on LinkedIn, but please check it out. And I'm also going to help you all have great jobs, and maybe you have a friend who would like to work at the Met. Have them connect with Lori Malberg, Lori-Malberg, Lori Malberg. Write down her name. You may not need a job, but someone you know needs a job. And you have to, this person has to connect with Lori on LinkedIn. And that's the first test. If she can't, or your friend can't connect with Lori, then can't find her on LinkedIn, they're not working at the Met. So that's one way things have changed. But I just want to give you one example, and that's of our boss. Tom Campbell, who's the CEO and director, is very active on Instagram. And he's on Instagram instead of Twitter because there's less drama on Instagram. I believe if you have a boss who is like Mark Cuban, who loves the drama of Twitter, then they should absolutely be on Twitter. But the Instagram is a great way to do social. And what he's doing, his Instagram handle is Thomas P. Campbell. Thomas P. Campbell. And what he's doing will be written about in newspapers and media outlets as a new way of leadership. And he isn't just saying, come see our exhibitions. In fact, he almost never says that. What he's saying is, I'm going to show you my world. And my world is of the Met, but it's also when Charlie Hebdo happens, he tweets something really from the heart. He posts something really from the heart on Instagram. When the terrible things that ISIS is doing affect art, he posts things way before other leaders even have a chance, because they have to go through lots of, is this the right thing? Should we do it? He just does it. And recently BuzzFeed named him one of the 23 best art Instagrams in the world. But I think he's one of the 23 best business Instagrams in the world, for brands to think about connecting with their readers, viewers, users, customers in new ways. And every couple of days I have to go into Instagram and answer comments from people saying, how many people are tweeting on behalf of Tom? Who's doing this? And it's all done by him. The magic of his fingers, his eyes, and his iPhone 4S. He has just gotten a 6 in the last few weeks, and it's going to be even better because he's on the 6 now. But the lesson for all brands is that we don't have to think of the 22-year-old intern who's going to be handling social. That's okay, and that's important. We need all the interns we can get. But think about how you can use your best assets, your top people, your thought leaders. If you're going to be a thought leader in today's world, you should be thought leading out in the social space as well. But by the way, please don't call yourself a thought leader. You ever see these in Twitter bios where it says thought leader? Like, that's the worst, right? Like, or social media ninja. Other people call you thought leaders. Well, if you write 9 books, you are a thought leader, so that's a different thing. My plan is to never write a book, so but to write lots of tweets instead. But just a final thought on this topic for all of you: just think about how you can get your most senior folks involved in your social. And if Tom Campbell, who is such a busy person, can do it, and he doesn't do it 5 times a day, he does it once every couple of days. And the most beautiful thing he does is not talk about the Met very often. He'll go somewhere and post something so generous about another museum. It just, I don't always have the fortitude to do that, but he does it in such a beautiful way, and that's a lesson, I think, for all of us.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Can I add a comment to that?
Actually, let's get started. I want to get the audience, and I'm not going to say audience, the rest of the participants involved. So hold that thought.
I'm just curious now, because obviously NASDAQ and Met have talked about.
Can you hear him?
Have talked about commenting, making micro content as it relates to Charlie Hebdo and ISIS. I'm curious, do you guys do things beyond that as it relates to Charlie Hebdo? I mean, what else did NASDAQ do to show support? Because my concern about just social engagement and activism is it allows a really easy opportunity to kind of say a lot, but then it doesn't necessarily provide a forum for people to do. And so I'm curious about what else you guys did.
Cool, great question.
Sure.
So yeah, and then anybody else.
So the quick answer is the other thing that we did was we held a moment of silence at the bell for all the victims that was televised. But I think that's probably the extent of it. It's hard for us to get more involved than that. I'm not sure that other brands did, whether they did more than that. I think it's kind of hard to do more than that in like the span of corporations. I think it's kind of, go ahead.
I would just say what Met does, I mean, that what Tom Campbell does is kind of on a personal but obviously very public level, but the Met for ISIS and other, these terrible things happening to art around the world, the Met is very involved. Art conservators are working very closely with other experts around the world to help save art when we can. And but this all precedes social media.
Right.
You may have heard of this movie called Monuments Men about I was going to say about Matt Damon and George Clooney going out and saving art that Hitler was destroying, but it was actually real people who did that, including a Met curator who went out and saved art in World War II. So you have to do both. You have to do the real work, and you have to also say publicly, because that means a lot, and that combination is key.
Well, and I'm going to come to right now. But interestingly, you're all aware that if you have the Red Cross has an app that you can put on your phone that will help you get located in the event of an earthquake or other disaster.
No.
So that when you're buried under the rubble, you hit the app and it sends out to the first responders. Yeah, I'm just thinking a do on that issue of art, for instance, would be something. A social do would be an app for folks in Iraq to have on their smartphones, so that when a museum's being hacked or destroyed or looted, or they find a piece of art, they could communicate. I mean, there's ways to use this technology to accomplish things, which is your question, not just talk about them. And I think that's our challenge here is, one, what are those things? And also, is it reasonable to expect institutions or brands to actually get that involved? Or do we walk out of here after an hour saying, you know what, actually it is a marketing channel? And there's nothing wrong with that. And let me get to you in a minute. I promise this guy first. Mark.
Thank you. So I think what that last comment basically defined, right, is what the do tank is all about here, right? Imagining a world in which all of the corporates can walk up to the line, but they can't cross the line and empower their organizations to take that leap forward, to challenge their employees, their other corporations, the other elements of it, right? And so the whole do tank is about how do we imagine a world in which it's not an advertising-based thing, but it's an activism-based thing.
Right.
And I think that's always the challenge and the conundrum that you all face as organizations. And the question is are there people today who are stepping over that line as corporations?
I think so.
Yeah. And then,
I mean,
and then
that's a topic I love to talk about, because I think that, brands that are doing marketing campaigns or they're doing PR campaigns, they should match to a cause that has meaning, that matches their brand. We've just a couple of quick, really interesting examples is at a conference that we were at with someone very high up at MasterCard that does a lot of good work for causes. And he was one of the keynotes, and he's talking, and people in the audience are raising their hands saying, well, why don't you do more with the brand? And he said, well, I never disrespect it by using it as a marketing piece. And then you're going, but wait a minute, you could give them more money, and they need that right now. So we went into a workshop that Valerie Gelb from MasterCard, that's one of my partners, actually ran, and we had the Global Fund for Women CEO in there, and Walt McNee in there. And between them, the Global Fund CEO stood up and she said, I need brands' help, and I want to work with them, but I feel like I'm coming in with a 10 cup. And between them, we had this engagement that by the end, they realized that side by side working together, they're the greatest vehicle for that brand you could have, as long as you have a transparent, relevant agenda that resonates and makes sense, and it isn't baloney and it's true. In social media, that's what works, because then you harness all of those advocates that are passionate about the cause that you help, right? So it's intelligent marketing. And I think the agencies are starting to get it. I think brands are starting to get it, like the Like a Girl campaign that you just saw. They're starting to figure it out. They need to match it up, and social is the driver.
And that's interesting. I'm going to come to you first. I'm going to go to you first. But just a quick side note. And I'd love your thoughts on this too. So the Dove Real Beauty campaign is, 15 years old now? Did it accomplish anything?
It's not palm oil, right?
Right.
Okay, because they made a film they made a film. Chris Graves told this story. They made a film that they put a lot of money in at O&M that had to do with the foundation, the Dove Foundation, and all the great things it was doing for women. And then Greenpeace and others slammed them on the palm oil deforestation. And so it turned it completely around because they literally, Nestle and Unilever, they brought them to their knees in terms of withdrawing palm oil from the product. Unintended consequence of social media. It was a total social media play because whoever the activists were, they did a spoof for the web, on YouTube or somewhere else. They did a spoof of the Dove women, how much we're helping women at the foundation. They literally parodied it, and that shifted the whole thing. And I did just want Danetta to talk about what she did with UN Women and the Gateway, so thank you. That's what I wanted to think.
Okay.
Before that, can I just, sorry, no, I just want to finish up on Danetta's piece with MasterCard and some of the other corporations. The whole point is that normally what has happened in the past is you enter through the branding or your ad agency. That's what creates the disingenuousness or people thinking that, you're really not doing this for a pure purpose. But the minute you begin to take your initiatives, your social messaging throughout the organization, crossing through all verticals of an organization, crossing through the businesses, it's moving from marketing to communication to your actual business lines to your sales teams. That's how you create change, and that's how corporations and nonprofits can bridge to each other.
And it raises a great question: Do we want our brands to actually be activists in our communities, or ultimately would we rather they produce great content that makes us feel good and buy stuff? And isn't that business? I'm going to get to you next time. To go to Michael first. You're next.
Yeah. No. We're sort of spinning around the issue of credibility. I think before there was social media, there was media, and to the extent that you believed the ad in your picture, it was because there was a separation of church and state, media, editorial, advertising, and nothing stays the same. I think that's also the other point of this session. I don't think it's fair to assume that social media is staying the same now that it's been invented. So, I guess my question to the room is, in the current situation with the decline of credibility from all sources, not just from brands, but also from, because in the internet everyone's a dog, where is this all headed? Are we in fact devaluing the very medium that we're talking about as potentially a platform for activism?
Once it's lost its credibility,
yeah.
What are you acting on? I mean, it's impossible to act other than to like a cat video. Anybody want to take this?
I think that's a profound question. I'm not going to address that. I just give me thought further. Some of the questions I have when I'm reading TripAdvisor or any of these, who's participating? Like whose opinion am I getting? And do I value more those 40 comments from people I don't know versus the one person who went to the hotel and said, yeah, that's a good place to stay? And how much are these comments kind of coming from paid consultants or staff? Data-driven MIT here is I want to know whose voices are these, and is it really an accurate representation of a broad-based community?
I promised you. Anybody else want to jump in here? Okay, I'll get you in a minute. I promised her.
What you said.
I think if brands are considering participating in activism, they do have an ethical responsibility to not drown voices out. Interestingly enough, when you talk about Charlie Hebdo, to be frank, it's easy to stand Je suis Charlie Hebdo. But does anybody know what corporations and brands actively did for Eric Garner or Mike Brown? And that kind of risk-taking lends the brand credibility and a face to the American people when we look within our country, instead of this vague terrorism that is easy to band against.
Right, it's like an obvious good or bad, as it were. And I'd add to that, it's a great question, and then guys jump in, and I'll get to it. I'm sorry. So Chick-fil-A has a policy that they are not open on Sundays because that's the day of rest. It's an idiotic business decision because that's when everybody wants to go out and have lunch or dinner with their family. But they've chosen to be closed because that's a principle of the business. So almost as a corollary, there are a whole bunch of people who would probably find that really dumb and really think, and actually draw a bunch of conclusions from it. But that's a kind of authentic action that has consequences, right? If we're talking activism for brands or institutions, it means being willing to make enemies as much as it means wanting to make friends. And that's a hard thing because businesses are only in that friend part. That's the whole point of the advertising. I don't do marketing to alienate people. I do marketing to sell them crap. Yet the fundamental driver of activism and that peer-to-peer thing that I think Michael was talking about in terms of where social is going, truthfully, or it already is, we just in the corporate world don't really fully know it yet, is toward that taking positions and risking being disliked as well as liked. So I'll come to you. Anyone want to channel that a little bit?
On Chick-fil-A, I mean, yikes. Like, they have like a full-on anti-gay agenda. I think that's a brand where they're really taking like big strikes, and if they ever try and do something, I mean, social media has come out against them in a big way with all like the kiss-ins in front of their establishments.
Yeah.
But it really hasn't affected their business.
Oh, it riled the base. The base is there, right?
That's the problem.
That's what they wanted.
I think their brand strategy actually kind of revolves around being controversial.
Yeah.
So for brands that aren't like kind of like where their controversy is not like innate to them, taking stances that are, I think your Eric Garner comment is absolutely valid, but I think that for, when not all the information is clear and there's strange things going on and the media is swirling around it, taking stances on stuff like that, I think is a little too dangerous for brands until it's actually clear. And then it's too late.
But this is not new. I mean, you know that Michael Jordan famously never spoke about politics because he said Republicans buy shoes too. And we see that even in a digital story in the backlash to Tidal. I don't know if you follow this TIDAL. This is the new streaming service run by. I'm sorry.
Billboards following.
Yeah.
Every day.
So in fact, you should add to this. But what has happened is people are saying, that here are all these musicians taking a stand.